Well, the Kadyn Proctor news continues to reverberate across Hawkeye Nation. We break it down with our recruiting guru, Brian Smith. A look at Kadyn Proctor, what his leaving for Alabama means for Iowa, and get into recruiting. Class of 2025, 6 commitments, plus we set up the weekend ahead for the Iowa women and men on the hardwood all today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I'm Trent Condon, joined today by Brian Smith. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Brian, good to see you again. It is football season. Spring practice has started up for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I know, well, down in your neck of the woods, some programs have already got started. Now, we have to wait a little bit longer up here, but we'll get into plenty of that. We're going to talk some recruiting, definitely a big part of your background in a little bit. But I want to open up with the news from earlier this week. Kadyn Proctor, after the excitement of getting the former 5-star kid from just down the street from me over at Southeast Polk High School, coming back to Iowa. Well, we got all of 2 months out of him before he's making his way back to Alabama. A crazy one. And this is not just a local story. As you know, Brian, this has become a national story.
Yeah, it's weird. Leaves home, picks Alabama, decides after a year he's going to go and play for the Hawkeyes right down the road from where he lives. And then out of the blue, he's back at Alabama. First and foremost, you can't lose 5-star kids, any program, and be happy about it. Second, he's homegrown. And then finally, look, let's be honest, there aren't a lot of 5-star kids in Iowa. When they're there, they got to get them. Yep. So the only thing with this is it sucks. And the extended part, and this is my own wheelhouse, I hate, not dislike, I hate the rule that you can transfer more than once without sitting out. It is an awful rule, and it's why college coaches are doing everything in their power to leave for the NFL. They hate dealing with the transfer portal and all the garbage that goes with it because of this rule.
It's something that needs to be changed, adapted. The problem is that we don't have a government structure in the NCAA that's going to make it happen. And, Brian, one of the things that has driven me nuts over the last 2 decades, as I've been on radio and now doing podcasts here, is we haven't had real leadership at the top level. We've all seen this coming. Eventually, we were going to get here, but the presidents of the NCAA were all guys at the end of their career. They're all guys collecting that final paycheck from guys like Miles Brand that were in their 60s, 70s. We're going to collect a bag a couple more times, but we don't really care about the future. It's about the here and now. And they didn't want to upset the apple cart and do things that needed to be done. And it's created this environment that we sit here today where there are no rules. We get to this point, and instead of having somebody forward thinking and thinking about the future of college athletics, they just kick the can down the road. And here we are. It's an incredibly frustrating aspect to me.
Yeah, like at some point there has to be definitive accountability. And now we've got Congress and courts and stuff involved. We all know that the big scheme of government is going to help the NCAA so much. If you can't read my sarcasm in that, please listen to that again. It will be horrific. That's a bunch of people trying to get votes and get young people to vote for them because the players love it. But I'm telling you, it's a terrible rule. And it's going to make college football a lot worse. There's going to be less continuity. There's going to be a lot of kids that aren't really going for education, which that's been a problem anyway. This accentuates it. And then finally, again, when a bunch of guys want to leave college that are good and they can go, that just hurts the game again. There's negative after negative here. There is no positive with this. So, yeah, it's bad news bears.
As we look at the football side of things for Iowa, losing a player of his stature, he's talented. He started 14 games for Alabama last year. You could see over the course of last season just the ascension that he was making as a player and just the improvements that we saw out of him. I know he came into campus overweight. He was nearing 400 pounds when he showed up in Tuscaloosa. And that was something that they worked on. They were hard on him, but they worked him into playing shape. And by the end of the year, he was playing at a high level. He comes to Iowa, we get excited because this offensive line the last 2 years has been nothing short of awful. And though it was better this year, it still wasn't good, I don't think, by any measure. Better run blocking this season. We can argue scheme, and that was a big problem with it too. But you put Kadyn Proctor in there, all right. Mason Richmond, a 3-year starter at tackle. You can go from left tackle, which he's not equipped for. You move him to right tackle or even move him inside. They did the same thing with Connor Colby. Now you're going back to that kind of musical chairs that you've been playing over the last couple of seasons. Though you got experienced guys, there's not those high-level guys. There's not what we're used to at Iowa. There's no Tristan Wirfs. There's no Brian Bulaga. There's not those kind of players that are there on that offensive line. You're back to the drawing board. I mean, how impactful just for putting together this new offense with Tim Lester, how impactful now is this going to be losing Proctor?
It changes your play calling. If you don't have confidence on 3rd and 5 that you can run a drop back pass, what are you supposed to call? Like I'm going to go out on a limb and wager heavily that the next coordinator is better than the prior, but you still have to pass protect. Like there are just certain things that are there. Then the other, like I've seen Proctor play live. I was at the Iron Bowl. Walking by him, I thought I was seeing the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
Like he's a very big man. So you can't lose that in the run game either, because he would have been your 3rd down and 1 run blocker, outside zone. I mean, Iowa's going to run that 4 million times. You know what I mean? Like not many guys are cutting around that edge. So it changes every play call in the game. It's not very often that an offensive lineman can do that, but he's a 3-and-out kid and he's going to be in the NFL draft. You can't lose those guys. It's going to hinder you. Now, how they reshuffle, I think everybody should remember, and just to put it out there, the 16th to the 30th of April is the transfer portal. Everybody that I talk to, every show says we need another offensive lineman.
Yep.
Good luck.
Brian, you nailed it, because I had that on my list of questions for you here today. Iowa's got to shop. I think they have to find a tackle. They have to do that. But it's so difficult. We saw Ohio State last year. They went to the portal. One guy didn't even hit. The other one was below average, and certainly for Ohio State standards, because they knew the same kind of thing. And that's Ohio State. I mean, they got kind of the best of the bunch, and they got the money to spend in NIL to make something like that happen. Everybody's looking for Iowa offensive linemen, and now Iowa behind the 8 ball. Relationships probably aren't there because they thought they were set. It screws Iowa in a way in trying to put this thing together. And Tim Lester, the new offensive coordinator, he's been scheming the last 2 months saying, all right, I think we got something here up front. Back to the drawing board there, and just what they're going to do stylistically. This is the Kadyn Proctor thing is a national story, because just the rarity of seeing a guy transfer, and the ability to do that, which is crazy in its own right. But on a local level and an Iowa level, this hurts them so much and sets up. And now the Big Ten West is going away. There's no more playing Purdue and Illinois and Northwestern every single season. Schedule gets a lot more difficult going forward.
Yeah, let's put it like this. Without a pure left tackle in either the SEC or Big Ten moving forward, without the divisions and all that, you can go 2-3 weeks in a row where the opposite team you're going against, the guy that putting his hand in the dirt on the edge is going to get paid. If you don't have a pure left tackle, and I mean one that might get paid himself, it's not going to go well. There is no shortcut for that. There is no play call for that. Either you got a guy or you don't. That's why losing Proctor is hard, and that's why you see left tackles go so high in the draft. It's just there aren't very many of them. As to your point about Ohio State struggling to get linemen this past year, I was just on that show too. Like that, I said, "What's your weakest position?" O-line. I knew that's what he was going to say. There are about 5 teams in college football right now that have at least adequate to good offensive lines. It's again, it goes back to like a lot of the coaches, like O-line coaches, don't like change much. NIL and the portal and all. A lot of them retired, literally in straight up conjunction with this. So O-line play, Iowa may be bad again this year, but don't feel bad. Teams you're playing are probably going to have bad O-line play too. It's not very easy. And again, the transfer portal, O-line, you need continuity. You got some guys coming back that at least 2-3 years they've played. That's good. Still need talent more than anything, but some of these teams don't even have the continuity either. Like they're starting like 4 new transfers. Good luck to them, man. That's a rough road.
We were going to talk a little more about Iowa. We're going to get into the future with Brian Smith as he joins us here today. Football Scout _Florida is where you can find him on X and get a great breakdown of all kinds of guys. Camp season right around the corner. There's a whole lot there. We're going to talk about the Hawkeyes, 6 commitments for the class of 2025. We'll get into that and who else is out there for the Hawkeyes as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. This season, make sure to groom your carpets and drapes with the leader in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out that winter bush with Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special hour. Go to manscaped.com and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off, plus free shipping. Hate making a mess? Not to worry. This bad boy is waterproof. I love this part of it. Shave in the shower, in the bath, or you can do it in the ocean. Love this thing. And it also comes in a compact case. Take it wherever you go. A little manscaping while you're out on the beach. That is a good thing. Taking some spring break time. Get 20% off and free shipping with code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. Nothing like a little spring cleaning in your pants. Also today, brought to you by Game Time and the Game Time app. Tickets, we're looking for them. Carver Hawkeye Radio. You want to get there for the women's tournament this weekend, for the opening round matchup on Saturday, or the round of 32 on Monday. Your place to go is Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets for your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. See the view from your seat before you buy. It is my favorite aspect of Game Time, along with great prices that you can find there. Know exactly what to expect, where your seat's going to be when you arrive inside the building. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and make sure you use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. We got Brian Smith with us talking some recruiting. So Brian, right before we went live today, you took a little peek at the class of 2025 commitment at the quarterback position, Jimmy Sullivan, kid from Indiana. The thing that I love is the athletic ability that he has, as we hope and pray that there's no more Spencer Petrus's of the world, and even Nate Stanley's, as good as his numbers were. Somebody with a little bit more mobility. We harken back to the days of Drew Tate and Brad Banks and those kind of guys and their athletic ability, and would like to see something like that. Even a Ricky Stanzi, who's not an uber athlete, but at least could move around. Let's talk about the quarterback class of 2025. They got Jimmy Sullivan relatively early. What you see out of the prospect out of Indiana?
I see him listed at 6'2", 180 by the surface I'm looking at right now. I think he's a little bigger than that now. I don't know, but that's probably an old read. Mm-hmm. He's got a good arm, man. And when he runs RPO and he decides to hit the hole, he hits it like a running back. He's not a real fearful guy. He kind of fits Iowa football mentality. Caveman downhill, let's run the football, but he's the quarterback and he can go. I think he will help them change into a modern offense. And I pray for your sake and your psychiatry bill that I'm correct on that. But they needed something like this. They needed a guy that I was excited. I don't remember the last time I said, Trent, I'm excited about this quarterback Iowa's recruiting. This kid's a good football player, and he plays in Fort Wayne. And for those that don't know, Fort Wayne's got good football. He's going up against some talent, and he's got the arm strength to make some plays against some guys that are going to play college. So that's a good start, because let's be honest, after what we've seen the last few years, getting any decent quarterback probably wasn't the easiest sell for the Hawks. I'd imagine that they're going to need some receivers to come along to help him. But, getting him early is probably above what you would expect. Now they need to get some skill guys to go with him that play receiver. I'll put you in charge of that, Trent. How about that?
I'll definitely do that. I'll make some phone calls here. Well, I got one right in my backyard in West Des Moines, Zay Robinson, a kid that I told you to keep your eye on. If he hits the recruiting services and goes out to a bunch of camps, I think he's a guy that's going to go from a regional recruit and really blow up. He's got Iowa State, Iowa, K-State, Missouri, kind of the the connecting schools, but
Sure.
I think you're going to see more Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, an athlete unlike anything I've seen in 20 years of covering high school sports here in the state of Iowa. Speaking of those great athletes, Thomas Meyer from Clear Lake, tight end,
He's a guy.
huge, high-level guy. This was one we kind of talk about, those big level recruits out of the state of Iowa. You need to keep a guy like this home. Texas A&M doesn't recruit the state of Iowa very often. I don't think Jimbo made his way very often, but he had an offer for them, had an offer from Miami. You can tell how good Thomas Meyer is. I know we've talked about him before, but when you put in the tape, what does make him special?
The ability to catch the ball like a receiver, the ability to make something happen after he gets the ball like a receiver. I know he's listed as a tight end, but his movements don't say it. That's a good thing. I'm not saying he's the next number 87 in Kansas City, but I'm just saying, like, as a college prospect, there's no reason to think that he can't thrive. So they finally are getting some quarterback play. Hopefully in the future they can get him the ball, and they're going to be using some more RPO, or I don't think they would recruit the kind of quarterback they have in this class either. Offense opening up, him playing outside in the slot, like not many DBs are going to be able to cover a kid like this. Throw fade balls to him in the red zone. You can all but just telegraph it. You have to put somebody out there, but you're not going to put a linebacker. So some poor corner on a fade ball against him from the 6-yard line. Good luck. That's when you win with talent. That's how you get over the top and get more than 7 or 8 wins in a season, is having guys like this.
Another tight end in this class, Eli Johnson, a kid out of Wisconsin. Now, he didn't have a Badger offer, but did have Minnesota, Michigan State, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa State, Vanderbilt, Purdue, West Virginia involved in his services. A little bit bigger, more of maybe your traditional inline tight end for Eli Johnson?
I think he'll end up being 6'5", 250.
Oh,
Got to have one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to run 12 personnel, and I feel confident the Hawkeyes will do so, this is the perfect guy to complement the guy that's going to be 6'5", 230-ish, give or take. And that's fine. In today's game, you can play a lot of games with your formations based off your personnel being the same and really keep teams at guard. Because once you get out there, and God forbid Iowa ran no huddle, but if they did that and got teams out of position with who they have on the field, they could have some fun with it. So Eli's a good player too, catching the ball, but I don't know if he's quite the talent that the other young man is. So let's see what he can do blocking first before we talk about him getting the ball.
All right. A couple linebackers in this class already committed out of the 6 guys that are committed currently, both out of Illinois. Burke Goucher, who committed last fall, and then the most recent one, Carson Cooney from Oswego. Both those guys kind of fit the prototype of what I was looking for. 6'3", 200, 215 pounds at this level. You'll add a little bit of weight. You'll become a linebacker there. It's just crazy. They're getting so many of these guys. They only play 2 linebackers anymore. Is there a thought maybe one of these guys bulk up and become a rush end, a defensive end, something like that? What do you see with both of those linebackers out of Illinois?
Well, that was the first thing that I wondered about, because everybody has to, in their starting defense anymore, your nickel is out there instead of an outside linebacker. It's just, whether you play corner or safety, it's not a linebacker. I wonder if Cooney, because he's listed at 6'3", 215, either he's a combo player or he's a young man that plays linebacker a little bit, but that is a rush guy in a 3-3-5 package. Like, there's all kinds of ways you can use somebody like that and kind of go from there. Look, Burke Goucher is 200 pounds right now. He could end up being your hybrid if you're playing a power team, or he could be your will or whatever. There's some versatility there as well. Again, you have to adapt to today's game. And recruits, it's a little bit smaller now is the key, because they got to run faster. The game is played horizontally, and if you cannot get to the perimeter, it's a touchdown on a simple swing pass. Iowa's recruiting to that scheme, and good for them. So I don't have any problem with taking a couple early if you think they can do that. And we both know that obviously Iowa's defensive staff is tremendous, considering the hole they're always seemingly put in with the Iowa offense, and they get them out of it more often than not. So I'll trust their judgment of who they're taking, but just looking at the measurables, that's what I would guess.
Final guy here, local kid from over in the Quad Cities, Joey Van Wetsinga. His dad, football coach over there for a number of years at Bettendorf, at Pleasant Valley, excuse me. His older brother is a walk-on in the program. Joey, though, he was kind of the one that they're always talking about. You know how that happens sometimes with families, and it's always like, just wait. And for a young Joey, he's been a guy we've been hearing about since he was in middle school. He's not as highly regarded, at least in the recruiting services, but he committed to Iowa very early. And I think everybody knew he was going to be a Hawkeye family too. maybe slow down some of the recruiting there. I think he'd be a guy that'd be a pretty decent regional recruit if he didn't have the Iowa connections that he's had in the past. Have you seen anything on Van Wetzinga?
I haven't watched him recently, but two things. Number one, if you're from a family like that they knew you were a guy when you're like 12 to 14 years of age, I'm guessing he's pretty aggressive, and I'm guessing he's really strong. And he's 6'2", 255. If that doesn't sound like a future 3 technique for the Hawkeyes, I don't know what is. They're going to put 25 pounds on him, and he's going to be the guy that's in the backfield a lot. And the announcer loves saying his last name after he makes a tackle. So I think that's about as tradition as you can get with the state of Iowa. But they always have a kid like that playing defensive tackle. They always do. I will, once again, if it's a defensive recruit for Iowa, I don't really question.
A lot of questions offensively. Not so many.
Offensively, I take my time. Sorry, I do.
Brian, last thing for you. We'll get you out on this. You mentioned that though they have 6 commitments, they're 17th in the country over at 24/7 in national recruiting for this class. It's the volume, having 6 already, but they don't have a ton of offers that are, I guess, realistic. They've offered the who's who of college football, as you'd anticipate that they have. But when you kind of look at who they've offered at this point in time, I know this is official. They come from recruiting websites. We don't know exactly who's been recruited. It sounded like you were maybe a little bit concerned about what this class could eventually look like for Iowa.
The key with every year, Iowa or otherwise, is during spring ball, getting kids on campus to see the school, see how they practice, and then you line up OVs. Now, I know their practice is just getting rolling, but over the next 2 weeks, if you do not see things on X and on Instagram, etc., I'm taking a visit to Iowa or whatever, that's not a good sign. Everybody does the same thing. Like Georgia does the same thing. Get kids on campus. Am I comfortable with Kirby Smart and his staff? Then you set the OVs. This is the really important time. But right now, they don't have many visits lined up from what we know. Again, you said it correctly. We don't have all the data. That's inside the Hawkeyes football facility as it should be. But it's still pretty clear most of the time. So I want to see what they're going to get. And it's D-tackle. It's obviously receivers, number 1 on the board until otherwise proven, probably the next 3 years. Yeah. They're so far behind in receivers because of the offensive scheme that they have to get a go-go guy. A guy that is just better than the guy in front of him that can stretch the defense so the running backs aren't getting suffocated. And they also just need more team speed in general, taking athletes. So you might see him take some kid that's a 3-star from South Carolina or something that can really run a track kid. And that's okay. Right. But they got to get these visits lined up. That's my concern right now.
Last time they did something like that, Brandon Smith turned out to be a pretty good player for him out of Mississippi. And they went that route. He wasn't getting the SEC offers. He wanted to play at a major conference, though. There's plenty of those kids, as you know, down in that territory that'd be willing to take a Big Ten offer. Hey, Brian, always good catching up with you. Always appreciate your time. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great day.
Our conversations with Brian brought to you, as always, by our friends with LinkedIn and LinkedIn Jobs. Each and every time we have Brian on here, it's sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. We continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Looking forward to the weekend. Iowa, Utah, men's basketball, NIT Sweet 16 kind of matchup. In that one, we'll talk about that a little bit and break things down and, of course, get you ready for the weekend for the Iowa women Saturday, Monday in the NCAA Tournament at Carver Hawkeye Arena. We'll do that as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Auburn Tigers can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. As they knocked off the Florida Gators in the SEC Tournament Championship, they're set to make a run in the NCAA Tournament. Led by former Iowa assistant head coach Bruce Pearl, Auburn, though in a tough bracket in the East, certainly got a path to make some noise coming up this March. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. That's NissanUSA.com. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So we will get to tomorrow, Saturday, and we will get a matchup for Iowa against the 16 seed. and it's going to be a blowout, and it's going to be fun, and I was going to put a ton of points on the board, and everything's going to be great. But then we look forward to Monday, and we will, on the instant reaction coming up in your feed Sunday night into Monday morning, we will definitely talk a little bit more about the matchups. But who would you like to see? It's a question that I've got a lot here. You got two varying styles. West Virginia coming out as the number 8 seed, or Princeton, the number 9 seed. West Virginia coming out of the Big 12, that would be the easy answer, right? You don't want to play a team out of the Big 12. You don't want to have a team. But you kind of look at West Virginia against top-level competition this year. Outside of 2 games, it hasn't been real good. They have a good defender. Their point guard, one of the top defenders in the Big 12. I think that's impactful and something that you look at. But she's also not real tall. Caitlin Clark at 6 foot, just how good she is, how tall she is, how big she is, the size and the speed that she has at 6 foot definitely makes her a different type of player. On the other side, Princeton, that would be the one I think that worries me a little bit more. This game will be played right after the Iowa game against the 16 seed. That'll be about 4:30. That will get the start time with West Virginia and Princeton there from Carver. I would probably lean, though, more towards playing West Virginia. Plus, you get the motivational aspect, right? Their coach saying, let's go out there and end Caitlin Clark's career, get a win, and then end Caitlin Clark's career. I see you got that. And Caitlin, it's like we talk about with MJ, right? And I took that personally. And you could definitely see that playing out on that front. So I would lean that direction, rather see West Virginia than Princeton, just because Princeton, they're going to slow it down. They're going to make it methodical. And it doesn't happen often. I was usually in almost every single matchup that they've had this year, and really over the last couple of seasons, they've been able to dictate the pace. But there are a few times where that just doesn't happen. And playing that slow, plodding, methodical style of Princeton, I don't think Iowa has to worry, but that would be my preference. We'll see what we get on that one. And then on the other side, we, of course, have the NIT. And Iowa now making their road trip out to Utah after the victory earlier this week against Kansas State. Ken Pomeroy has Utah favored by 4 in this one. That's basically home court advantage. This is really close to a toss-up. Speaking of that, in the ratings at Ken Pomeroy, Utah is ranked 50th in the country, Iowa 52nd. So that shows you how close this is. So how does Iowa get the win? A good defensive team out of Utah. They don't force many turnovers. Iowa, very good at not turning the basketball over. That's a start. Have to shoot the basketball well from the outside, though. That is an angle where Iowa, more than anything, needs to shoot it well from the outside. The biggest reason is because Utah's 2-point defense is one of the tops in the country. So that's a concerning aspect here. This is definitely going to have to be a game where you shoot it well. Another interesting angle is people say, well, how do you quantify playing in altitude, right? We know there's an advantage. Playing in altitude when you're not used to it, it's impactful to your lungs. You're going to be breathing a little bit harder. It's different. We get that. Here's one way to see that. Iowa is one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country, 77.7% this season. That's 19th in the country. Utah, defensively against a free throw. And you can't play defense, obviously, against a free throw, but I think this shows you what altitude does. 68.4% are what opponents are shooting this season against them. It's just one of those weird numbers that kind of leave you wondering, now what exactly is going on there? Is there something with that mountain air that makes teams struggle shooting the basketball? Now, that is also away games, which always isn't the case, obviously, with Utah this season, but just something at least that you can kind of put your finger on, if you will. This team is terrible themselves at the free throw line, shooting the basketball from the free throw line, but a good 3-point shooter this season, 58th in the country at over 36% on the season. They're going to pound it inside. They have a couple of big guys that they're going to play. Watch their game against UC Irvine. Really impressed with what I saw out of that squad. Really good game from Brandon Carlson. He's their big 7-footer, 225, a guy that I know Iowa was interested in coming out of high school, a guy that there was some connections there. He's been around for a long time. Madsen, another really good player for them. Another senior. He's been around for a while. Fourth-year guy that started his career at Cincinnati. So there's a big lineup that they're going to play. They're going to be built, but Iowa with Freeman and Krikke, and if he can Krikke play at the level certainly we saw in the second half against Kansas State, I think there's a shot here. And if you get to the quarterfinals, potentially even get another home game, if there's an upset on the top half of the bracket, that would be a good thing for this program. Desante Bowen has exited. He has announced his intention to enter the transfer portal. Well, the portal is open for basketball, which is stupid in its own right, but we have that there. And of course, we got wrestling, and we talked about that about yesterday on the program. You can go back and listen for that. For the wrestling fans, as we are underway in the NCAA wrestling tournament. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Appreciate each and every one of you out there. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday and bringing you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again Monday. Have a great weekend and go Hawks.